Today I am bringing you my July reading wrap-up, and yes, this video is a little bit late. I was ill the first week of August. I had a cold and was feeling very sorry for myself, but I'm all recovered now and I'm ready to talk about all of the books that I read last month, as well as 2 books that I finished in August. I started them at the end of July, but I finished them in the first week of August, and I didn't see the point in waiting like another few weeks before talking to you about those books. So we're going to kick things off. I think we're just going to go in order of when I read these books rather than try and put them in any other order. But the first book that I have on my list is A Pirate's Life for Tea by Rebecca Thorne. This is the second book in the Tomes and Tea series, which is a cozy fantasy series. The first book is Can't Spell Treason Without Tea, and that follows, this whole series follows 2 main characters, Chianthe and Raina, who decide to leave their stressful jobs behind. One of them is a soldier or a guard in the Queen's Guard, and the other is the most powerful mage in the country. They are in an established relationship, but because of their jobs, they can't really be together, so they decide to leave everything behind and move to this small town, which is on the edge of Dragon Country. And the first book is all about them setting up this bookshop that's also a tea shop and getting to know all of the other characters who live in this small town. There's also a plot that involves the dragons terrorising this town, so it has a bit of a hint of adventure, but it's really very slice of life. It's about them opening this business, and I really enjoyed the first book. I gave it 4 stars. This was closer to a 3. I still enjoyed it. I had a decent time with it, but this lost the slice of life element. It became more of an adventure story, and the thing with cozy fantasy is I don't want the stakes to feel high, and I don't think they did in this book. There were certain situations where characters, for example, would be in a dangerous situation. It wasn't really that dangerous, and I think that was the point, is that there was just a bit too much action in this, and I didn't find it believable because this is a cozy fantasy and the whole point is that the stakes are low. I am going to continue this series though, because I do think it's a very sweet and easy read. It's also sapphic, and I think it's very rare in fantasy to follow an established couple. Raina and Chianthe were together. Their relationship started before the start of book 1, and it's really interesting to see their relationship develop throughout these books. Also in this one, you can see it's a book about pirates. Throughout this, I don't know how much to say, but there's a quest, kind of. There's a plot that starts in the first book that is continued into this one, and they are basically trying to track down this pirate who is causing some trouble for the local government. It's also about them trying to bring together 2 childhood best friends who have drifted apart. So yeah, 3 stars. It wasn't bad, but I can't say that I really loved it. Next up, I read Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry, which is this author's most recent release. It came out a good few months ago now, and I have put this on so many TBRs, but I finally got around to reading it at the start of July. I actually listened to the audiobook for this. I saw it was narrated by Julia Whalen, who is one of my favourite audiobook narrators. It's the first Emily Henry book that I have listened to. I've read all of her other books on my Kindle, and I really enjoyed this. I had lower expectations because I'd heard some mixed things, but what I found with Emily Henry books, because they're usually 50-50 split between romance and another plot, how you feel about the book overall is very much going to depend on how you feel about that side plot, as well as how you feel about the romance. But I think with this book in particular, the negative reviews that I've seen have been people saying that they didn't care about the side plot, which is completely understandable. I thought it was an interesting side plot. We're basically following this main character whose name I can't remember, but she is a writer and she is competing against this guy who is the love interest to tell the story of this famous woman. I can remember the name of the famous woman. Her name is Margaret, and I kind of imagined her as being like Paris Hilton, but in her 70s. So her family were very famous. I think they even owned a hotel chain or something like that. They were just super rich, and she grew up in the public eye. She was followed around a lot by the media, but now she's in her 70s. She's kind of faded to obscurity, and she's ready to tell her story. But she's choosing between these 2 writers as to who is gonna write this book. And yeah, I enjoyed the romance. I don't think it was the best developed romance that I've ever read, but I thought that there was decent chemistry between them, and I found myself feeling invested in the side plot as well, like this woman's story. How it all came together in the end I thought was not the most satisfying, but it was fine. To be honest, I've kind of forgotten a lot about this book, so even though I gave it 4 stars, I would probably say that those 4 stars were for my enjoyment at the time. I was engaged with the audiobook, but it was narrated by my favourite audiobook narrator, so it was one of those where I kept looking for excuses to listen to it, and I was enjoying it in the moment, but I don't think this is going to stick with me super long term. I still enjoyed it more than Book Lovers though. It's not my least favourite Emily Henry book. Next up I read The Devil's Advocate by Steve Cavanagh, which is, I want to say, the 6th book in the Eddie Flynn series. If you don't know, this is a crime thriller series. It's a legal thriller series where we follow this guy called Eddie Flynn, who's a New York lawyer, he's a defence attorney, and his whole ethos is that he will only represent people that he believes are innocent. Each book follows a different case that he's working on. I actually started with 13, which is the 4th book in the series, and I think that's the book that most people start with. I actually went to an event with this author a few weeks ago, and he said that that was the book that really propelled the series and gathered a lot of attention. So that's where I would recommend starting. I do have the first 3 books on my Kindle, but I've not got around to reading them. But the point is, each book follows a different case that Eddie is working on, and in The Devil's Advocate, he's contacted by someone who wants him to go to, I want to say, Alabama, where a teenage black boy has been accused of murdering this girl in this small town. The DA of this small town has a track record of being very harsh, and this book really talks about how, I can't remember the statistics, I talked about this in the vlog where I read it, but the author's note at the end talks about all the research that the author did, and apparently there's a certain number of attorneys or DAs, prosecutors within the United States who are responsible for a large percentage of people who are sent to death row, and that's what this book is really talking about. So Eddie and some of his team travel to this small town where they're met with extreme hostility. Everyone in this town has decided that this guy is responsible and he's guilty, and it was very frustrating to read, like deliberately so. You're meant to feel a lot of anger and frustration while reading this, and it was so tense. It was one of those books that I could not put down, and that's what I found with every single book that I've read in this series. I start them, and I have to make sure that I start them quite early in the day on a weekend, because chances are I'm going to keep reading until I've finished. I think I read this in 2 sittings. There are some truly evil people in this book. I would say actually the only negative that I had, which wasn't really a negative, but I felt like the courtroom scenes in this weren't as prominent as in previous books. That would be my only small criticism, but I still gave it 5 stars, and I need to continue this series ASAP. I think there's another 2 books that I need to read, and then he's also had a brand new book in this series come out over the summer. Next up I read A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers, which is the 2nd book in the Wayfarers series. This series, if you don't know, starts with A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, I think is the 1st book, and then each book, from what I gather, is set within the same future, because in this series we are way in the future, where humans have left Earth, gone out into the galaxy, and have started to interact and mingle with other alien races. So each book, from what I understand, is set within this same future, but we're following different characters. So the characters that you follow in this 2nd book are not the same characters in the 1st book. I was a little bit nervous about that, however I ended up loving this 2nd book even more than book 1, and I gave book 1 5 stars. It's one of my favourite books of the year, so I wasn't expecting to like book 2 even more. I didn't think that was possible, but I loved how this book in particular is about body autonomy. In this world, AIs are not allowed to inhabit a physical form, a physical body, and it really delves into that. There's also another character that you're following who, as a young girl, grew up on this planet where children are used as slave labour, and it's all about her survival. What I love the most about this series though is not just the found family aspect, because in both books there's been that strong found family element. What I also like is how this is really a book about compassion. It's about how all of these different alien races make the effort in most cases to understand different cultures to themselves, and I just really love that. Next up I read another sequel. I read The Republic of Thieves by Scott Lynch, which is the third book in the Gentleman Bastard series. I always want to call it the Lies of Locke Lamora series because that's the name of the first book, but I finally got around to reading this third book, and I think this is my favourite book in the series so far, which might be controversial. I don't think it was perfect. I don't think I gave it 5 stars. I think I gave it a 4, but that was mostly because some parts felt a little bit clunky, and I don't think this really delivered on what I was expecting, but I still liked the development of the characters, and at this point in the series I am invested in these characters. So if you don't know, this series is following a group of people who are con artists. That's literally all you really need to know. The first book is set in this Venetian inspired city, and then the world kind of expands from there. The second book has a pirate nautical theme, and then this third book, because each book is episodic in that there's a different con, if that's what you want to call it. There's something the team, the group are trying to achieve, and this third book is kind of about a political campaign, or at least that's what it sets itself up to be. The crew are getting involved in this political situation in this city, but it's not really about that. That's kind of like the side plot. The main plot is this exploration of a relationship, and it's not like the most romantic relationship that I've ever read. I was invested in the characters. I also thought the dialogue in this was really witty. I mean, I felt that way about the previous books, but I think just in terms of the pacing and yeah, my investment, it was really high in this third book in comparison to, I think the second book was just a bit slumpy for me. This was really good in my opinion, and even though it's an incomplete series, I do believe that the next book is rumoured to be coming out soon. I think there's going to be a short story collection, and then there's going to be a 4th book, but I'm not sure how many books are planned in total. Next on my list we have My Friends by Fredrik Backman, which is a new release. This came out over the summer. I listened to this one on audio, and I kind of wish I'd read it physically. I'd not read any of Fredrik Backman's other books via audio. I've always read them on my Kindle, and I think seeing his words speaks to me just a little more than hearing them, but I still really enjoyed the listening experience, and there still were some beautiful passages that were very quotable. Fredrik Backman, the way that he writes, it comes across like he really understands humanity, and he really understands the way that people's minds work, and as well as human behaviour. His writing to me still feels quite simple. It feels like he's using as fewer words as possible to get across his point, and I love that. I think it's a real talent. This book, if you don't know, is following Louisa, who is 18, I think. She grew up in foster care, and at the start of the book she breaks into this building where this painting is on display. So she has been obsessed with this particular painting her whole life. Most people look at it and think it's just a painting of the sea, but she looks at it as a painting of these friends who are sat at the end of this pier, and the story kind of goes from there. It's about Louisa going on this physical journey. She's travelling somewhere with someone who knew the artist and who is telling her the story of this artist as well as their friends. You have these 2 timelines, one in the present day and one in the past, and it doesn't really feel rooted in any particular time period. The past timeline does feel nostalgic, but I think you could read this at any age and kind of see yourself in the situation, and I think it will take you back to that time when you're a teenager and you have this group of friends that you're really close to. All of these teenagers in the past timeline have been through some kind of trauma. I thought that the character work in this was really good. I felt invested in these characters, and there was also just that touch of humour to balance out the really sad parts, because it feels very melancholy, especially in the beginning. I would recommend checking the trigger warnings for this if you need them. I will say that Fredrik Backman has kind of a lighter touch. He doesn't go into graphic detail, for example, but he does approach these heavy topics in his writing, and he writes in a way that really works for me and that really affects me. So yeah, that's why this was 4 stars. I can't really remember the reason it wasn't a 5. It just didn't really give me that 5-star feeling. Sometimes I think he tries too hard to divert you as a reader, so he'll lead you to make an assumption about something, but then he'll switch it around and say, haha, you made this assumption about this thing which actually isn't the case, and now I'm going to tell you what actually happened. But sometimes he doesn't do that, and it ends up making me feel like I can't trust what I'm reading. I find it quite irritating when it happens too often, and because I've read quite a lot of his books, I've started to notice a pattern with that. So that was the only little thing that I didn't love, but otherwise I thought this was a solid contemporary fiction and I would recommend it. Next up I read Midnight Tides by Steven Erikson, which is the 5th book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series. If you have read this series and you want my spoilery thoughts, then I do have a spoiler reading vlog for this book and pretty much all the other books in this series. I'll leave the Malazan playlist linked in the description. I don't want to spend too much time talking about this book in my wrap-up because me and my partner actually filmed a spoiler-filled discussion now that we're halfway through Malazan. He's reading it for the 2nd time, I'm reading it for the 1st time. This series does have a bit of a reputation for being confusing and dense. I don't feel like it's either of those things. I think that it all depends on your mentality when you start the series. I think if you go into it knowing that things aren't going to make sense and things aren't going to be explained to you on the page, but you are going to be given information in bits that will help you piece things together. I think if you're willing to just go with the flow and just soak it all in, if you don't understand something, just make a note and move on. I think if you're willing to do that, then it's actually not that confusing. The writing, in my opinion, also isn't dense. Steven Erikson actually doesn't use that much exposition in terms of descriptions or explanations for stuff. He's much more focused on dialogue and character interactions, and sometimes his character writing doesn't always work for me, but I'm glad that I've persisted with this series because I'm really enjoying discussing it with people. If you do want an epic fantasy series that has that community, then I would recommend this series. My camera batteries keep overheating because it's so hot in this room. I keep having to swap them out, but we're almost there. We have 2 more books left to go, and they're both books that I started in July but finished in August. First up, we have What Happens in the Dark by Kia Abdullah. I always get the name of this book wrong, but I think I've written it down right. This is Kia Abdullah's newest release. It's a legal courtroom thriller, which is what Kia Abdullah tends to do in her books, and I have some mixed feelings on this one. How do I even begin to explain the plot for this? So we're following 2 women who were childhood best friends. They're now in their 30s and they both work within the media. One is a breakfast TV presenter and the other is a journalist for a local newspaper. One of these women is accused of murder and her defense is that she was being abused. The story goes from there. It follows the court case, and the other woman is desperately, not desperately, that's a bit dramatic, but she's trying to find out what actually happened and uncover the truth. The courtroom scenes I thought were really dynamically written. I was gripped and engaged the whole way through. I kept trying to work out whether I was being gaslit because I felt like it was really obvious what was happening. Really appreciated how this book was trying to show that abusers rely on their victims to be too ashamed to come forward and to speak up. I felt like it was doing a lot of things right. However, the ending, to me, there was a particular element that was introduced. It happened right near the end of the book and then it wasn't explored in a way that to me felt satisfying or like it was doing this particular theme justice. I don't know whether I'm explaining myself very well, but also the way that it ends on kind of a cliffhanger and there's something that's not fully resolved. So I don't know whether this book is going to be a series. I'd probably give it like a 3.5 to a 4 stars because I did enjoy most of it. It was just the ending that let it down for me. The final book on my list is Deep End by Ali Hazelwood, which is a contemporary romance. This is also a college romance. It follows a main character called Scarlett who is 21. She's in college and she is a student athlete. She's on the diving team. The love interest is on the swim team. His name is Luke and he is the ex-boyfriend of Scarlett's captain. Her friend Penelope. It's her friend Penelope's ex-boyfriend, but Penelope is actually the the one who suggests that Scarlett and Luke have this friends with benefits type situation, because the reason that Penelope and Luke broke up is because they're incompatible in the bedroom, but it turns out that Luke and Scarlett have similar interests in that department. It's a really messy setup, and the one thing that I struggled to get my head around is why Penelope didn't want people to know that her and Luke had split up. They were together for like 7 or 8 years. As far as their friends are concerned, they're still together, but then Scarlett and Luke are getting together, and I could not understand the situation or why anyone was okay with it. It confused me, and I gave this 3 stars just in case I haven't mentioned that yet. I thought it was fun. In terms of, I liked the plot. I liked how Scarlett was going to therapy and she was trying to move forward after going through an injury. So she had quite a serious injury, I think a year previously, and it's caused this block in her brain where she can no longer do certain dives. Really enjoyed everything to do with that and the plot outside of the romance, but the romance was just not really for me. It focused a lot on this dynamic, this power dynamic between the main couple. He wants to be dominant, she wants to be submissive, and it just wasn't to my personal taste. But I can see why other people would like this. I also thought this was just a little bit too long. I think it's over 400 pages, and I don't think any romance book needs to be that long. For a contemporary romance, I think 300 to 350 pages is fine. That does bring me to the end of this wrap up, so thank you for watching. If you made it this far, let me know in the comments if you have read any of these books and what you thought of them. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it, click subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me, but otherwise I will see you next time. Bye.